Pirates are often seen as wild criminals, drunk, violent, and totally out of control. But old contracts, court records, and ship logs reveal a different side. This is the real story of piracy. Contrary to popular myth, pirates didn't rely on chaos, they wrote contracts. Before embarking on a voyage, most pirate crews signed written articles. These documents outlined the rules of discipline, the division of spoils, and even a system of compensation. Court records and surviving pirate codes, such as those of Bartholomew Roberts, show that these agreements were not informal suggestions but binding contracts. They established a clear framework for life aboard the ship, turning a vessel of outlaws into a structured, self-governing enterprise. This system was designed to prevent the very conflicts that plagued the merchant and naval ships from which many pirates had fled. Pirate ships were surprisingly democratic institutions. Captains were not absolute rulers. Contemporary accounts reveal they were typically elected by a majority vote of the crew. Their authority was largely confined to battle and navigation. For day-to-day governance, power often rested with a quartermaster, also elected, who managed provisions and adjudicated minor disputes. If a captain proved abusive, incompetent, or cowardly, the crew could vote to remove him from command. This practice stood in stark contrast to the hierarchical and often tyrannical command structures of the British Royal Navy or Merchant Marine, where a captain's power was nearly absolute. A core principle of the pirate enterprise was equitable profit sharing. When a prize was taken, the loot was divided according to pre-agreed shares outlined in the ship's articles. While the captain and skilled specialists, like the ship's surgeon or carpenter, received a slightly larger portion, perhaps 1.5 or 2 shares, the common sailor received a full share. This system ensured that every member of the crew had a direct stake in the success of the venture. It was a radical departure from the wage system on merchant vessels, where common sailors saw little of the vast profits their labor generated for distant ship owners and investors. Pirate articles also functioned as an early form of workplace insurance. Testimonies from captured pirates and recovered ships' codes confirm that specific payments were guaranteed for injuries sustained in the line of duty. A man who lost a right arm might receive 600 pieces of 8, while a left arm or leg could be worth 500. The loss of an eye was compensated with 100 pieces of 8. This system provided a safety net for sailors in a profession where dismemberment was a constant risk. On naval or merchant ships, a crippled sailor was often cast aside with no support, left to beg in port cities. For pirates, compensation for injury was a contractual right. Discipline was not arbitrary, but was enforced according to the written code. While modern depictions show pirates as anarchic brawlers, their articles laid out strict prohibitions against fighting on board, bringing women onto the ship without consent, or gambling with dice and cards. Stealing from a fellow crewmate was one of the most serious offenses. The punishment for such a transgression was often marooning, being abandoned on a deserted island with a flask of water, a pistol, and a single shot. This strict internal justice system was essential for maintaining order and cohesion among a crew of armed men living in close quarters. For many sailors, piracy was a rational labor choice. Life in the Merchant Marine or the Royal Navy during the early 18th century was characterized by brutal discipline, low pay, rancid food, and staggering mortality rates from disease and accidents. Captains frequently abused their power, and ship owners often cheated sailors out of their meager wages. Faced with these conditions, piracy offered an alternative: higher potential earnings, democratic governance, and a greater degree of personal autonomy. Analysis of sailors' journals and court depositions suggests that thousands were not forced into piracy, but actively chose it as a preferable, if riskier, way of life. The pirate economy did not exist in a vacuum. It relied on extensive black market networks. After capturing a ship, pirates needed a way to convert stolen goods like sugar, textiles, and spices into cash. They did so through a web of sympathetic merchants and corrupt colonial officials in ports from the Carolinas to Madagascar. These merchants would purchase plundered cargo at a discount and then sell it into the legitimate colonial market, laundering the profits. This symbiotic relationship was crucial. Without these networks to liquidate their assets, the pirate business model would have collapsed. The line between pirate and legitimate seamen was often a matter of paperwork. During times of war, governments issued letters of marque to private ship captains, authorizing them to attack and plunder enemy merchant shipping. These licensed raiders were known as privateers. They operated legally, splitting their profits with the crown. However, when wars ended, thousands of armed and experienced privateers were suddenly unemployed. Many simply continued their activities without a license, transitioning from state-sanctioned privateering to illegal piracy. For them, the only thing that had changed was their legal status. Colonial empires, while publicly condemning piracy, often quietly benefited from it. In fledgling colonies, officials frequently turned a blind eye to pirates who brought in much-needed goods and hard currency. Governors in colonies like New York and Jamaica were known to offer pirates protection and a place to spend their money in exchange for a share of the plunder. This state complicity allowed pirate havens to flourish, as local economies became dependent on the influx of pirate gold. Piracy was only aggressively suppressed when it began to threaten the profits of powerful, state-chartered monopolies like the East India Company. Contrary to their bloodthirsty reputation, most pirates preferred to avoid unnecessary violence. Their primary goal was profit, and a damaged ship or a dead crew was bad for business. Pirates cultivated a fearsome reputation, often flying the Jolly Roger, as a form of psychological warfare. The goal was to intimidate a target vessel into surrendering without a fight. If a crew resisted, violence was swift and decisive. But if they surrendered peacefully, they were usually spared. Court records show that merchant crews were far more likely to be killed resisting pirates than they were to be massacred after a peaceful surrender. Pirate ships were remarkably cosmopolitan and multi-ethnic spaces for their time. Crew lists and trial records reveal that ships were crewed by men from across Europe, the Americas, and Africa. A single vessel could include English, French, Dutch, and Swedish sailors working alongside indigenous Americans and men of African descent. For many, a pirate ship was a rare environment where a man's skill and courage mattered more than his nationality or the color of his skin. This diversity was a direct result of the global nature of maritime labor during the Age of Sail. For enslaved people, piracy offered a unique pathway to freedom. Historical sources document that a significant number of pirates were formerly enslaved men who had either escaped or been captured during raids on slave ships. On a pirate vessel, these men could gain a measure of autonomy and equality impossible anywhere else in the Atlantic world. They were given a full share of the plunder and the right to vote and bear arms. While racial prejudice was not entirely absent, pirate ships represented a profound exception to the rigid racial hierarchies that defined colonial society. Although the maritime world was overwhelmingly male, women were not entirely absent from the golden age of piracy. The most famous examples are Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who sailed with Calico Jack Rackham's crew in the Caribbean. Accounts from their 1720 trial in Jamaica confirm that they dressed as men, carried pistols and cutlasses, and participated fully in combat. While their cases were exceptional, they demonstrate that women could, on rare occasions, break through the rigid gender norms of the era and carve out a life of adventure and rebellion at sea. Pirate activities had a significant impact on local economies. Ports that welcomed pirates, such as Port Royal in Jamaica or Nassau in the Bahamas, experienced economic booms. Pirates spent their plundered wealth lavishly on food, drink, and entertainment, injecting huge amounts of specie into local businesses. Tavern keepers, merchants, and artisans all profited from the pirates' presence. These pirate nests became bustling commercial centers, their prosperity directly tied to the success of illegal raiding on the high seas. Pirates were not just thieves. They were disruptors of an emerging global economic system. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European empires established vast, state-chartered trading monopolies like the East India Company and the Royal African Company. These companies controlled trade routes and exploited both colonial subjects and their own sailors. By attacking the ships of these monopolies, pirates directly challenged their economic dominance. They operated as an armed, floating opposition to the exploitative practices of mercantilist capitalism, siphoning off profits and interfering with imperial supply chains. Despite the romantic allure, a pirate's career was almost always brutally short. The average pirate lasted only 2 to 3 years before being killed in battle, lost to a shipwreck, or succumbing to tropical disease. The constant dangers of life at sea were compounded by the ever-present threat of the gallows. For those who managed to survive the perils of the ocean and combat, the odds of a peaceful retirement were slim. The vast majority did not live to enjoy their ill-gotten gains. When the state did capture pirates, their punishment was designed for maximum public impact. Captured pirates were often brought to major port cities for highly publicized trials. Those found guilty were subjected to mass public executions by hanging. Their bodies were frequently gibbeted, coated in tar, and hung in iron cages at harbor entrances as a graphic warning to other sailors considering a turn to piracy. These spectacles were political theater, intended to reassure merchants and demonstrate the power of the state to enforce its maritime laws. The golden age of piracy did not simply fade away. It was systematically crushed. By the 1720s, European empires could no longer tolerate the disruption to their colonial trade. The Royal Navy launched a concerted campaign to hunt down pirates, deploying fast, well-armed warships to patrol the Caribbean, the American coast, and the Indian Ocean. Simultaneously, colonial courts were empowered to prosecute pirates more effectively. This combination of overwhelming naval force and coordinated legal action systematically dismantled the pirate networks and brought the era to a violent close. Much of what we think we know about pirates comes from later myth-making. The iconic image of the peg-legged, parrot-shouldering pirate with a treasure map derives largely from 18th-century books like Charles Johnson's A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates, and later, 19th-century fiction like Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. These works often sensationalized and romanticized their subjects, transforming complex historical figures into one-dimensional caricatures. The historical pirate was far less theatrical, but far more significant. Ultimately, pirates were rational economic actors. They created organized, democratic, and multicultural societies that operated in direct opposition to the oppressive labor conditions and monopolistic practices of the empires of their day. They were not simply chaotic criminals but participants in a parallel global economy that operated outside imperial law but was inextricably linked to it. Their story is not one of simple banditry, but a complex chapter in the history of labor, resistance, and the violent birth of global capitalism. Pirates were criminals, but they were also workers, organizers, and economic actors responding to brutal systems of labor and trade. History isn't just chaos or heroism, it's structure, incentives, and survival. And sometimes, the people outside the law followed rules more strictly than those inside it. Thanks a ton for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more awesome content.